You can be surrounded by people who love you, people who would answer if you called at 2 a.m., people who would say, without hesitation, that you matter deeply to them, people who have known you for years, who have celebrated your wins and sat beside you in your worst moments. Genuine, good people who genuinely care about you. And you can stand in the middle of all of that, in the warmth of all of it, and feel more completely alone than you have ever felt in your life. Not the loneliness of someone who has nobody, something harder and more specific than that. The specific, devastating experience of being in a room full of people who believe they know you, and knowing with absolute certainty that none of them do. That what they know, what they love, what they have invested years of relationship in, is a version of you. A carefully constructed, consistently maintained, socially acceptable version of you that has almost nothing to do with the person who is watching all of it from somewhere behind your eyes and wondering if they will ever be found. That experience is not loneliness in the ordinary sense. It is something more precise, more costly, and more common than almost anything else happening in the interior lives of the people around you right now. By the time this ends, you will understand exactly what it is, exactly where it came from, and the one specific thing you can begin doing, not someday, but in the next 24 hours, that starts to close the gap between who you have been showing and who you actually are. I want to tell you what I understood on a night that I have not been able to forget. It was a gathering, good people, people I had known for years, the kind of evening that, from the outside, would have looked like exactly what human connection is supposed to look like. Conversation, laughter, the comfortable familiarity of people who have been in each other's lives long enough to know each other's histories. And I sat in the middle of it and felt something I was not prepared for. I looked around at those faces, faces I genuinely cared about, people who genuinely cared about me, and I felt the specific, breathtaking clarity of a single thought. None of these people know me, not because they were incapable of knowing, not because they were indifferent, but because the person they knew was not me. It was the version I had brought to every room for as long as I could remember. Capable, composed, interested, fine. The version that had learned, over years of quiet calibration, exactly how much of itself was safe to bring into any given space. I had been so thoroughly that version for so long that I sat in that room and could not locate the actual person behind it. And for one specific, terrible moment, I wondered if there was one. If the performance had gone on long enough that the performer had ceased to exist entirely. That was the night I understood what loneliness actually is. Not the absence of people, the absence of being known. And it is possible, in fact, it is extremely common, to be surrounded by people who love you while living in that specific interior emptiness. Because the people who love you have never met the person they are loving. They are in a relationship with the performance, and the actual person, sitting somewhere beneath all of it, is still alone, still waiting, still wondering what would happen if they walked out from behind the version everyone has come to expect and simply stood there, real and uncurated and complete. Carl Jung spent his entire professional life mapping the interior architecture of the human psyche, and what he observed about loneliness is one of the most important and least discussed insights in all of depth psychology. He said that the loneliness most people experience, the deep, chronic interior loneliness that does not resolve through companionship or love or community, does not come from having no one around. It comes from a single, specific failure. The failure to communicate the things that actually matter to oneself, not the things that are interesting to talk about, not the things that make you good company, the things that actually matter, the real fears, the genuine desires, the private grief that never fully gets said, the version of your inner life that you have never yet trusted anyone enough to see. When those things go unexpressed, not occasionally but as a way of life, the loneliness they produce is not a mood. It is not a season. It is a structural condition. The structural condition of a self that has been present in every room without ever truly arriving in any of them. And here is the most important thing I need you to understand about why this happens. It is not a character flaw. It is not shyness or introversion or an inability to connect. It is the specific, rational, psychologically coherent response of a person who learned, at some point early enough that they cannot clearly locate when, that the full version of who they were was not safe to bring forward. Not safe because someone told them so, usually. Safe because the environment communicated it, through reactions, through withdrawals, through the specific way that certain things they expressed were received, with discomfort, with dismissal, with the subtle but unmistakable signal that less of you would be better, that the edited version was preferable, that the room could handle a part of you more easily than the whole. And so the editing began, and continued, and eventually became so automatic that it stopped feeling like editing. It started feeling like personality. What I am describing is what Jung called the persona, the mask built not from dishonesty but from the entirely understandable desire to belong, to be received, to remain in connection with the people whose presence matters. The persona is not deception, it is protection. But it has a cost that most people never fully account for. Every relationship built on the persona is a relationship built on distance, not hostile distance, warm, genuine, mutual distance. Two people who care deeply about each other, separated by the specific gap between who they actually are and who they have agreed to be in the presence of one another. And in that gap, that polite, comfortable, carefully maintained gap, the loneliness lives. Here is the first thing to sit with honestly. Think about the person in your life who you are closest to, the one who knows you best. Now ask yourself, with the specific honesty that this question requires, what does that person not know about you? What have you never said? What do you carry that they have never been allowed to see? Not because you are hiding it deliberately, because it has never felt fully safe to bring forward. The answer to that question is the precise measurement of the distance that is making you lonely. Erich Fromm, one of the most penetrating psychologists of the 20th century, wrote about the human hunger for genuine connection with an urgency that made it clear he considered it not a luxury, but a survival need. He wrote that the experience of separateness, of being a self that is fundamentally alone in its own interiority, is the source of the most intense anxiety available to a human being, and that the entire history of human culture, religion, art, love, community is, at its deepest level, an attempt to answer that anxiety, to build a bridge across the gap between oneself and another. But here is what Fromm also observed, and what I believe is the most important thing you will hear in this video. Most of the bridges people build are not built between selves. They are built between performances. Two people, each showing the other a curated version of themselves, constructing an elaborate connection across the space between two personas, and calling it intimacy. It looks like connection. It has all the external markers of connection: history, shared experience, mutual care, the genuine warmth of two people who mean something to each other. And yet, for one or both people involved, there is a specific interior hollowness at the center of it. The hollowness of not being truly known, of knowing that the connection, however real it feels, is happening at one remove from the actual self. Fromm called the alternative, the real alternative, mature love. Not the love of two incomplete people filling each other's gaps, but the love of two complete people who are genuinely present with each other. Two selves, not two performances. Two people who have done the terrifying work of allowing themselves to be seen, and who discovered, in the specific relief of being seen and not rejected, that genuine connection is possible. But you cannot be genuinely seen until you are willing to genuinely appear. And appearing, really appearing, without the curation, without the management of impression, without the constant background calculation of what it is safe to bring forward, requires something that most people have never been given permission to do. It requires trusting that the actual version of you, not the edited one, not the one optimized for acceptance, is worth someone else's time. Here is the scenario I want you to sit with. Think about a recent conversation with someone you care about. Not a difficult conversation, an ordinary one. And notice how much of that conversation was the real version of what you were thinking and feeling. How much of what you said was genuinely, unedited you, and how much was the version of you that calculated, even for a fraction of a second, what was appropriate to say. How much did you perform, versus how much did you simply arrive? Most people, if they are honest, perform almost everything, not because they are dishonest, because they have been performing so long that they have almost entirely lost the distinction between the performance and the person. The conversation I want you to have with yourself tonight is, when did I last say something completely true to another person? When did I last let someone see something about me that I usually keep behind the editing? And what would have happened if I had? There is a counterintuitive truth at the center of this entire experience that I need to name clearly, because without it, nothing else I have said today will produce anything more than understanding. You cannot be known by others until you are known by yourself. The loneliness that lives in rooms full of people who love you is not primarily a problem of those relationships. It is a problem of the relationship you have with yourself, because you cannot show someone else the real version of you until you have located it. And most people, by the time they are adults, have been editing the real version for so long that they have genuinely lost direct access to it. The Austrian psychiatrist Viktor Frankl spent 3 years in Nazi concentration camps. He emerged with one of the most radical and transformative understandings of what it means to be human that any single person has produced. And what he wrote about identity is something I return to whenever I feel the distance between who I am and who I have been presenting growing too large. He wrote that the last of human freedoms, the freedom that cannot be taken even in the most extreme circumstances, is the freedom to choose one's own response to any given situation. Not to control the situation, not to control what others do, to choose the internal response. To decide, in the specific space between what happens and what you do next, who you are going to be. That freedom, the freedom to choose who you are rather than to allow who you are to be determined by what is expected of you, is the beginning of genuine self-knowledge. And genuine self-knowledge is the beginning of genuine connection. Because you cannot give another person access to a self you have not yet chosen to know yourself. The loneliness ends, not all at once, not dramatically, not in a single moment, when you begin the work of knowing yourself with the same attention and the same compassion that you have been trying to give everyone else. When you stop performing even for yourself. When you sit without the audience of your own judgment and ask the question that your interior life has been asking you for years. Who am I when there is no one watching? Here is what I want you to do. 5 things, beginning tonight. The first, have one honest conversation with yourself before you have it with anyone else. Tonight, before you sleep, write down the one thing you have been carrying that you have not yet said to anyone. Not for anyone else to see. Just to give it language. Just to let it exist somewhere outside the interior space where it has been living, unacknowledged, for too long. The act of writing it is the first act of acknowledging that it is real and that it deserves to exist. The second, say one true thing tomorrow. In a conversation, any conversation, say one thing that is genuinely, unedited, real. Not something you calculated to be acceptable, something true. It does not have to be dramatic or confessional. It can be small. The point is not what you say. The point is practicing the experience of arriving without the full performance, of letting one piece of the actual person appear. The third, identify one relationship where more of you is possible. There is almost certainly one person in your life in whose presence you feel the performance drop even slightly, where the real is closer to the surface than usual. Invest in that relationship, not because it is always comfortable. Genuine intimacy is not always comfortable, but because it is the environment in which the work of being known has the most opportunity to happen. The fourth, stop answering fine by default. The word fine is the most effective single word in the English language for ensuring that nobody ever finds out how you actually are. It closes every possible door to genuine exchange with a friendliness that makes the closing invisible. The next time someone asks how you are, someone who actually wants to know, choose one true word instead. Not a speech, not a confession. One honest word that actually describes something real. That word is a door opening rather than closing. The fifth, begin the practice of solitude without performance. Spend 15 minutes alone, not consuming, not scrolling, not filling the space with anything external, and simply be with yourself without judgment. This practice is not comfortable at first. The mind will resist it. But every minute spent in the company of your own unedited experience is a minute of genuine self-knowledge. And genuine self-knowledge is what makes genuine connection with others possible. You cannot give someone access to a self you have never fully met. You came into this video carrying a loneliness that has probably been with you for longer than you realized. Not the loneliness of having no one, the deeper kind. The interior, structural loneliness of being surrounded by people who think they know you. And knowing in the part of yourself you have learned not to acknowledge too directly that the person they know is not quite you. You are leaving with the precise name for what that is. Not a flaw, not an inability to connect, not a disease of your psychology. The entirely understandable consequence of a self that learned, in specific circumstances at a specific time, that the full version of itself was more than the environment could hold, that less of you would be better, that the edited version was safer. The editing worked. It kept you connected when connection required a cost you were right to find unacceptable. But the bill has been accumulating for years in the specific currency of a self that has never fully been present in the rooms it has occupied. That self is not gone. It has never been gone. It has been producing this signal, this quiet, insistent, impossible to fully ignore sense of not being known, for as long as the editing has been happening. Because part of you has always known the difference between performing your life and living it. The path back to being known begins with the first step toward being real. Not with everyone, not all at once, with one person, in one conversation, with one sentence that is genuinely, completely, unperformed you. That sentence is waiting. Comment below the word that describes the part of you that nobody has fully seen yet. Not an explanation, the name of it. Because the act of naming it here, even in this space, even to strangers, is the smallest version of the most important thing you have been avoiding. And if this is not finished with you, if something is still moving in you that one video cannot hold, what comes next goes deeper. Because the self that is waiting to be known has a specific history. And understanding that history is what makes finding it not just possible, but inevitable. Like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on that. See you in the next video.